Welcome to the Tech 45 podcast. I'm your host, Jack Ryan. Today I have the honor and privilege of interviewing one of my close friends, Scott Kelly. Scott Kelly and I met at the Penn State ROTC, Army ROTC program over a decade ago. And he's been a close friend and just a good source of encouragement in everything I've tried in my life since then. Scott, do you mind introducing yourself to my 7 listeners?
Not at all. Happy to be joining you this afternoon, and thanks for having me on. But yeah, my name's Scott. I met Jack here. We met at Penn State, but my first real memory of you is at Airborne School when we were. I still tell stories about that, but we'll get to that later, I guess, or maybe not. Depends on your podcast. But yeah, no, graduated from Penn State in 2012. Went into the Army, served for 10 years, split between the infantry and special forces. Now out in the private sector. Shameless plug for my own podcast. I host a podcast called At the Water's Edge, where we discuss national security and geopolitics from a practitioner standpoint of view. And yeah, thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh no, it's a joy. And by the way, your podcast is amazing. I know I told you that just now before we started recording, but like it's truly amazing. Like I knew it was going to be good because I know who you are and your interest in national security, and just your ability to synthesize like really complex geopolitical situations. I knew it was going to be good, but it's exceeded my expectations, and you're only on episode 13, I think.
Correct. I definitely appreciate the encouragement. You're also a great source of encouragement for things I do in my life. Even if you
Yeah,
did trash talk my sound setup for the first couple of episodes, which was
I did.
warranted.
I did. I definitely trash talked yourself. I don't know what you were recording on. I think you were probably recording on the onboard mic on your webcam, but it was like I'm like this podcast is too good. It deserves better equipment. So at least an entry level podcasting mic, which I see you upgraded to. Um, but yeah, I want to start with Airborne School. Scott and I
Okay.
went to Airborne School together. Scott was a sophomore in college, I believe, or going into your junior year.
Yep. Between sophomore and junior. Yep.
Okay, so Scott was going into his junior year of college while involved in the Penn State Army ROTC program, the Nittany Lion Battalion, as they call it. And I was going into my senior year of college. And Scott and I had the privilege to go to Airborne School as cadets, which precluded us from having to go as officers after we commissioned. So feel free to close your eyes. Dream with me. I, you and I, the first time we jumped out of an airplane
Yep.
was an amazing experience. I think we were on a C-130 or a C-17. They had we walked into the rigger warehouse, and it was 4 a.m. and they were playing this song. I don't know if you remember this song. I wish I could play it right now, but I don't want to get any copyright violations on my channel. Magnificent by Rick Ross and John Legend. I'd
Mm.
never heard that song before. So one of the parachute riggers with the red hat in this warehouse full of T11 and T10 Delta parachutes was blasting this song over a guitar amp. I think they probably had maybe an iPod at the time, probably an iPod plugged into a guitar amp, and they were blasting this song. Listen to the song if you get a chance. Magnificent by Rick Ross and John Legend. Incredible song, really cool beat. But you, me, and our friend Mike were going to pick up our first parachute for our very first airborne jump in a simulated training operation at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I
Yep.
remember this vividly. And that song, I was listening to that song this morning. It's on my running playlist and it comes on often. And so I was listening to it to get me hyped up for this podcast. And you and I, we do our little airborne refresher, practice your PLF in the gravel. And then you and I board the airplane. How
Yep.
did you feel at that moment when you knew like you'd done the tower, you'd done ground school, tower school, you get a lot of reps learning how to manipulate a parachute in a simulated environment. When you knew you were getting out of that airplane and you heard those turbines spinning on that military cargo jet, how did it make you feel? I want to hear this.
Oh, I was like, so I like to understand everything, and in that moment, I understood nothing, and I was like in stimulation overload, and I could barely process putting one foot in front of the other. Like, first of all, we go to pick up our chutes, and I go pick up my parachute, and they make you like put it on like your left arm and put your hand on your helmet and like jog like it's probably like 100 meters back to the shed
Oh yeah.
um,
Oh yeah.
after you pick it up, and then you go through your JMPI, and I go through my JMPI, and the guy's inspecting my chute, and the first thing he does is look at the static line. He's like, "Oh, that static line is no good. You have a bad static line. Go get another chute." And I'm like, "Well, okay." And I'm running back, like complaining about, I'm just tired because it's early. We had to run down there with those stupid like ankle bracelets on that they made us wear in jump
I
school.
forgot
And
about that.
then
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
forgot
wait a
about that.
second. how the hell did I get a busted static line? I haven't even gone on the bird yet. This is bullshit. So,
That's amazing.
with,
So back up.
yeah,
Let the viewers know what is JMPI. So
yep.
these are new airborne students. You're getting your very first parachute, and you're
Mhm.
about to do your very first airborne jump. What is the JMPI process look like? What does that mean?
Yeah. So before you jump out of any airplane in the Army, whether it's static line or free fall, you go through a JMPI, which is a jump master pre-inspection. There's this thing in the Army called a jump master. It's a person who's spent way too much time around airplanes and parachutes, looking at like every single way they're sewn together, they're packed, like how they're set up in the birds, like everything involving airborne operations. So after you get your parachute and whatever equipment you're jumping with that day, you have to stand in front of a jump master, and that jump master goes through all of your equipment to make sure it's serviceable. So they're checking the rubber bands are the right type. Everything's routed properly for all your straps. They check the hook on um, your static line, the actual static line, just everything about what you're going to be jumping with that day. So I get my parachute and I get all set up and I go do my inspection with the jump master. And the jump master looks at the parachute that I just drew from the chute shed and said, that parachute's defective. The static line, which opens the parachute, kind of important. It's a single point of failure in the entire system. Like that's got to work. Other things can be like kind of okay. That one's got to work. Uh, so yeah, he says, yeah, that static line's messed up. Go get another chute. So I had to go back to the riggers, turn in my chute, tell them that the jump master kicked it back for the static line. They rolled their eyes and handed me a second parachute and sent me back.
So ridiculous. I wanted to pull up. I don't know if you can see this picture of a
Yep.
T11 parachute. I don't know what the Army is jumping with now, but when the first time you and I jumped, this is the parachute we were handed. We were handed a T11,
Yep.
which has a significantly bigger surface area. So it's a bigger parachute than the aging T10 Deltas, which we also had the pleasure or displeasure of jumping with. So the
Mm-hmm.
idea is that the soldier will jump out of the C-17, C-5, C-130, Black Hawk, whatever the aircraft is. They'll jump out of the aircraft, and this is a larger chute, so hopefully the landing will be softer. But there's still a weight limit. I see. I forgot about the weight limit. So that's
Yeah.
not only
There's
like the personnel weight limit, but all of the gear that you're carrying. That's the payload weight. But I wanted the viewers who are watching to see what we're talking about. But that's this is what Scott's describing is when this parachute was packed into its military packaging and furled up and put on your back like a backpack. That's kind of what we're referring to when we talk about the JMPI process. And it's a critical process, and typically either a senior enlisted NCO or an officer, either company grade or a field grade officer, will go to a specific school called Jump Master School, which is also at Fort Benning, now Fort Moore.
mm-hmm.
And these individuals are charged with being like the last filter to check and make sure all the equipment is up to par and make sure
Yeah.
it's safe to jump with. So, did you go to Jump Master School?
I did not. It was
Yeah, I didn't either.
it was in
I
the
didn't
cards
either.
for me if I'd stuck around any longer, but no, didn't have the pleasure. I was supposed to go, but then we were getting ready for Afghanistan, and we knew we weren't jumping in Afghanistan, so it got pushed to the back of the docket.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense. I mean, there's been arguments in general about whether or not the airborne capability is really necessary because it was developed in the 1920s, 30s.
Hmm.
There was the U.S. obviously adopted it, but I think there was some European militaries that were using airborne operations as a potential capability to insert infantry troops into places where it would be very difficult to get to otherwise. But
Yeah.
okay, so the props are already spinning, or the turbines are already spinning. I can't remember if we jumped out of a C-130 or a C-17
First
first.
jump was a C-130 because jumping out of
C-130.
C-17 later was a big deal.
Okay, so
First
the
one was a
C-130,
C-130.
I think you're absolutely right. So the C-130s have propellers, which are
Yep.
driven by extremely powerful turbine engines that burn jet fuel like it's their job. And there's four Rolls-Royce engines, each with an immense amount of thrust. Okay, so these are all four engines are whining, and the crew is ready for us. They're ready to receive us, and then Cadet Kelly and Cadet Ryan step onto the C-130 aircraft. Tell me about the takeoff. Maybe the 15-minute ride before we actually jumped out of the side door. Oh, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. So tell me from your perspective what it felt like.
Sure. So we walk up the ramp. We're getting on the bird. I'm already like in stimulation overload, but I'm also like not like like I'm scared, but I'm not terrified yet. That'll come later. Um, I get on the bird. The first thing I notice is they tell us to sit down, and like there's no seats, there's no benches, there's no nothing. There's these cargo nets, and like the entire 2 weeks prior, they're like, "You protect your reserve handle, you protect your reserve chute. Anything that gets messed up is a potential fatality." Yada yada yada. And then they're just shoving us on cargo nets, and everything's getting mashed together. I'm like, this all just feels wrong. This just feels like we're getting packed like sardines in here. um, they just told us never do this, and we're doing this. So we do that, and then eventually you'll like this next part. Um, we're standing up and everything's surreal, and I'm just like, don't think, just do. Don't think, just do. Like I'm just going to walk out that door, and whatever happens, happens. This is beyond me now. And they finally like stand us up. They give us the commands. Hey, outboard personnel stand up, inboard personnel stand up, hook up. We hook up. The next thing I notice is like they say, like, static line up here, and then fully extend the static line when you start walking forward. But yeah, I'm a very precise guy, and I can't like fully extend without popping off extra rubber bands, which is fine. It's not a big deal. But all I know is that the jump master said fully extend, and I can't fully extend. So this is already wrong. And then you're behind me, and I've always remembered this because you were amped up, or I don't know what's going through your head, but I remember you like tapping me on the shoulder and you go, "It's just like our grandfathers, man." And I'm
Yeah, yeah, I
freaking out
was
and I
pretty
don't say
stoked.
anything. I'm just like, "Shut up, dude. I'm scared." And then, yeah, we're going out the door.
That was a little bit of false motivation on my end. I had to say something just because I have a motor mouth sometimes when I get nervous. And that
Yeah.
was one of those times where I was just nervous. I had to say something to make myself feel better. It was not at all genuine at all. But I had this realization that, like, we're not the first people that have done this. I think that's what I was trying to connect with. I was trying to connect with that, well, what I would be, but I would become an infantryman later on, not yet. But I was trying to connect with the infantrymen of our past
Yep.
in World War II,
Well,
who were
well, that
not
was a
only doing
great
this in
connection.
training.
Yeah. Well, that was a great
Go for it.
connection to go for, but you were also connecting with me and it was freaking me out. So that's what I remember.
Yeah, yeah. I think I might have interrupted your train of thought, but this is what Scott's talking about for the folks watching on video, either on YouTube or Spotify. This is that C-130. It's an amazing aircraft. It's been in service for a long time. Obviously with lots of avionics and engine upgrades. But this is the static line, this little yellow line that's protrudes from the OD green on the backs of these soldiers and ACUs. That's what Scott's talking about. This static line connects you to the aircraft. And when you jump out of the aircraft, the static line stays with the aircraft via the metal hook on a steel braided cable that's inside the aircraft. You do not stay attached to the static line. You exit the aircraft with as much force as you can push out with one of your legs. And you exit the aircraft. That static line pops up and pulls your parachute out with a force that's meant to be really be conducive to a successful low altitude jump, really under 1,000 feet, right? 1,000 feet.
Yeah. Training jumps are 1,200, operational are 8 to 500. Goal is to get you on the ground as fast as possible because theoretically you're getting shot at. So the chute opens very fast and then you fall very fast. And every single jump is a crash landing.
It is. It feels like a car wreck. It hurts a lot.
Yep.
It causes a lot of injuries, both in training and in an operational sense. But so when you hooked yourself up to that C-130 and you
Hmm.
heard those Rolls Royce engines screaming, and they opened the side door. So they opened the side door, which is our cue to, all right, get ready to jump out. They're about to tell us to jump out. When you were hook up, and you were attached, you were attached to this C-130 by a piece of nylon and a metal hook, and you go to exit the aircraft, and you are somehow find yourself in the thrust and the prop wash of this aircraft. What does it feel like? Tell the listeners that haven't experienced this. There's not that many people alive today, if you think about it, as a percentage of the U.S. population that have experienced jumping out of an aircraft like this.
Yeah. I guess one of the unique things about this is that you're doing it in rapid succession. The plane is flying very fast. They call it jumping out of a high performance aircraft. So this is different than your regular civilian jump at an airfield somewhere where plane slows down, you have a nice exit and everything else. Like you're throwing yourself into the prop blast of a C-130, flying at a speed that is just slow enough to safely jump, but as fast as they can do for aircraft safety if the aircraft's getting shot at. So everything is about risk mitigation, not about having a safe jump. And your body is not the only thing at risk here. So it's been sacrificed at some level in some statistical analysis somewhere. So yeah, you step out and it's just weird because you're falling through the sky. And yeah, when you go from inside the plane to stepping out directly in front of the prop blast and it throws you for the first time, especially if you're a rookie jumper and you don't have a good exit, you just go spiraling. And that's what happened to me. I just went spiraling through the sky because I didn't have a good exit. Um, and yeah, I remember the first thing after tumbling through. Remember the aircraft going by? Everyone always jokes that your first jump's a night jump because your eyes are closed. I was terrified. My eyes were wide open. I couldn't have closed them if I wanted to. I remember everything. Um, yeah, I jumped out. I remember the skin of the bird going past me, and I'm just tumbling and I'm counting, and all of a sudden the parachute opens up, and I would have been happy except because I tumbled so much, the risers had corkscrewed all the way down around my neck, so the chute's not opened all the way. And this is my fault, admittedly, but the chute's not open all the way, so I'm falling too fast. But I don't see this yet because I also so I did. This is my first time wearing a helmet in the army, so I didn't know how to adjust the back straps on the back of it that actually hold it in place for this, and I just kept like ratcheting down my chin strap, so my back's completely loose. So when the parachute wound down around my neck, it shoved my helmet in front of my face.
I didn't
So I
know
remember
that.
the aircraft going by and the chute opening, and then all of a sudden my helmet's in front of my face. And then I'm doing the thing they taught us in emergency procedures where I got my hands behind my risers and I'm bicycle kicking and I'm just spinning like a top in the air, trying to unwound all the risers so the chute fully deploys. So do that, chute pops open, shove my helmet back on and go, oh, cool, parachute's open. Oh, this is a really pretty view. Wait, I'm oscillating and crash landing. And then I got dragged across the ground for a while. And of course, jump masters on the ground watching this. And I thought they'd help me, but they were too busy laughing. So that didn't happen. So after I got drugged across the drop zone for a while, I ran into something and was able to pop the riser. And that was my first jump.
Yep. And what Scott means when he says pop the riser is
Right.
so the parachute is attached to your shoulders and there's metal clips right here, on either side of your clavicle, and that is what those metal clips are what holds the parachute to your body. And when you hit the ground, so think of like if you ever seen a drag race where the parachutes kind of like slow down the vehicle and kind of augment the braking system on those vehicles. You if there's a good enough gust of wind, that parachute will open up and then drag you across the ground. It'll get enough lift, where it'll drag you across the ground. So what they teach you in airborne school is to open up that metal clip and unclip one of the clips. So that way the parachute collapse more easily and you won't be dragged across the ground. It's less likely you'll be dragged across the ground. But yeah, what Scott's describing is very, very common. Someone's first jump out of a high performance aircraft. This is what's to be expected. That's why the drop zone is very soft on Fryer drop zone. They
Yep.
till the earth intentionally to make it softer. Whereas in a real life situation, there's a good likelihood you'd be jumping on asphalt or concrete
Yeah.
or whatever the airfield, whatever material the airfield's made out of, which causes a lot of injuries. And we won't get into that. But yeah, my favorite part is when that parachute opens up because A, it's a verification that, all right, I think I've got a much better likelihood of surviving this jump. And
Yep.
B, that peacefulness. I don't know if your other 4 jumps were like this in airborne school, but I had a couple jumps where, the chute opens up, your risers, everything happens the way it's supposed to, right? Everything, yeah,
Oh yeah.
Sergeant Airborne said, everything happens the way it's supposed to. And then you just like have this calm feeling after a violent exit. The best way I could describe it to someone, when you actually exit the aircraft and you're thrust into that prop wash on a C-130, it's like having the strongest human being on earth shove you down the steepest water slide, like just maybe 2 strong men just like shoving you down the water slide. That's the best way I can describe it as far as a realistic scenario. But yeah, when that chute opens, it fills up with air. It's got enough wind resistance to keep you floating there in midair. And you look around at the horizon and it's just quiet. Once that C-130 and you can hear those Rolls Royce engines, whine in the distance, but you hear this like unbelievable quiet and peacefulness, which is like such a crazy juxtaposition from the violent exit that you just experienced from that cargo plane. So anyway,
Yeah.
I had to tell that story because I've been wanting to talk to you about this for a while, and so we deliberately paired up with each other at airborne school. Like I think
Yeah.
one of our former one of the guys in our ROTC class, in my ROTC class, said, "Hey, make sure you guys stand in the same line and stand,
Oh, yeah.
right behind one another. That would, that would do two things. You would have the same bunk. I think we shared a bunk, or we're in the same room.
Yeah, you, Mike, and I
Um,
were all at the same room.
that's right. Yeah, bunk beds. Old school barracks in Fort Benning at the time, now Fort
Mhm.
Moore. And then it also pretty much guarantees that you'll jump on the same chalk, I think.
Yeah, because they just go in succession. So unless you're in a chalk break, which I think happened to Mike, because I think we didn't have him for the first couple of jumps, but then like we did the C-17, and that's like a longer chalk count or something. So we had him for the C-17. I think we were like he was just on the end of it, which I think made him either the first guy or the last guy in every one of his jumps.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And so this, at this time period, Scott and I are, we're eager, we're filled with, what, in vinegar, and we're getting ready to commission as officers in the United States Army, with the hopes of, getting the branch that we want and getting the job function in the Army that we want. What I want to do is one question I was really eager to ask you, and I don't know if I've asked you this before. I might have a long time ago, but you seem like the kind of guy. I know you're the kind of guy where you have like the right mix of like brains and physical stamina and strength to be like an Army officer. I think it's a perfect fit for you. But I want to know from your perspective. I asked the last guest who was on here, Major Austin Carreau, why did you join the Army? Like, what about the Army or the military at large interested you as a young man?
Um, Sense of duty, sense of purpose, sense of belonging. Coming out of high school, there's a lot of things I wanted to do. The other thing I was serious about, so I was serious about two things in high school. One was junior ROTC, the military, which is something I've always loved since I was a kid, and the other was music. Um, I was in the Penn State Blue Band. I was a freshman walk on to the drum line. I played snare. Just finished touring with Drum Corps Internationals, an All American musician in high school. My original major on our Army ROTC contract was actually music performance.
I didn't know that.
Um, yeah, that's yeah. This goes way back, but obviously it changed later. Um, but there was always something about military service, and it was like if I don't do this now, no matter what else I do in my life, I will always wonder about this. So whatever else I might do, I need to do this first. So, and I can only do it now. I can't come back and do it later. So let me go ahead and do it now. And then it was like, okay, if I'm going to do it, if you're going to be in the army, be in the army. Well, that means be in the infantry. And if you're going to be in the infantry, better be an airborne ranger. So better go to ranger school. Like there's like a success of things. Like by the time I showed up freshman year, it's like need to do Army ROTC, need to join the infantry, need to be an airborne ranger. Like that is my measure of success in life right now.
Yeah, you were committed to that from really early on. I remember talking to you about that when you were still a sophomore, in at the Penn State ROTC program, an MS2, if you will, or
yes.
to signify your second year in the program, MS2, Mission Set 2, I think is what it stands for. Um, I could tell right away that you were determined to do this. I mean, at what point in time did you recognize that infantry was the branch that you wanted?
Infantry was the only branch I ever wanted. It's not
Okay,
so much
that's
that
like
I recognized the infantry was what I wanted, it's that nothing else was worth doing. But the
that's
old
awesome.
phrase is like being in the army and not being infantry is like being on the Yankees, but you're only the bat boy.
Yeah, So what you said is true. I can say that because I've been through it, and I think about my time in the army, and the thought of being anything other than an infantryman is like I can't even wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
But I had a very different pathway than you. I picked the infantry branch on a whim. I don't know. I haven't told many people this. I was going to go finance actually, or maybe finance or aviation, something some cush job. I was
Mhm.
like, and I had little bit of interest in aviation
The
once
types
I
of
got to
jobs
take a
where
look.
you can make good money when you get out too. Like if you want a good career, like those are actually the smarter
They are.
choices.
They are. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. But hey, not everything you have to do in your life has to be reasonable and has to have like a direct, correlation to your next move in the chess game. And what I thought when I was talking to a few of my, a few of my buddies who were about to commission as well, and so you get back. I got back from Airborne School. We got back from Airborne School. Scott and I missed the first 2 weeks of Penn State, the first semester in the fall. Um, the teachers were fine with it. Most of them were fine with it. That was a time for me to pick my branch. You had another year to decide.
Yep.
I had to pick my branch within, maybe a matter of 6 to 8 weeks of getting back from Airborne School and that story that Scott so eloquently described. I had to pick my branch. And so they hand you a stack of paper and say, hey, these are your options. You got to pick, you got to put in your preferences for your job. What do you want to do in the Army? You don't always get what you want. And then you got to put in your preferences for your duty station. You rarely get what you want. And then there's a couple other options that the Army makes an effort to try to take your preferences into consideration. But the truth is, you're a second lieutenant, and there's many slots that need to be filled at the platoon and company and battalion level. And what the Army needs is way more important than what your preferences are. And so what I did is, I was walking down, I think I was walking around the Wagner building, undoubtedly, which is the ROTC headquarters at Penn State. If it's still there, I don't know if anyone knows if it's still there. Someone at Penn State ROTC, let me know. But a couple of my buddies said, we were talking about branches. I'm like, oh, what are you guys going to branch? And I'd already had in my mind, maybe finance or aviation, something cush. And they're like, oh, they all said, like all three of them said, oh, we're going infantry. Infantry. Ah, that word, infantry. And I said, infantry? Really? Why? And they're like, well, that's the only branch.
Well, why is the sky blue, Ryan? Tell me, why is the sky blue?
They said it so matter-of-factly. And I mean, our cadres certainly reinforced this idea because a lot of those guys were infantry guys too. And I was like, you know what? Whatever, I'm going to do it. And so I checked that box. And I got it. And I was a little bit hesitant about the decision. I was like, I don't know if I made the right choice. And then you asked me 6 months later or a year later, when I was suffering in the cold at Fort Benning, Georgia, shivering in Ranger School, I was like, I don't know if I made the right decision. I think this is a bad idea. I don't know if did you have any moments like that where you either questioned your decision? Maybe it wasn't in IBOLC or Ranger School, but maybe it was in SFAS or the Q course. Like, did you ever have a moment in time like I did where you were questioning a lot of your decisions in life due to the physical suffering that you were experiencing?
No, because I already knew that if I didn't do it then, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. So I knew that I had to do that to give myself permission to do anything else first. So I never doubted the choice. I definitely had moments of, well, one, let me answer my question before. The reason why the sky is blue is because God loves the infantry. But
Yes, that's true.
that is the correct answer.
I didn't pick up on that. Yeah.
Okay. So like 2 moments right after Ranger School. Because Ranger School was still the most miserable thing I've ever done in the Army, even with Special Forces selection and training and all that stuff. I got my Ranger tab, and that was like the big thing. I was like, all right, I'm airborne qualified. I got my Ranger tab. I'm in the infantry. I'm going to a light infantry unit. And I was like, wait a second. So what's my actual day job now? Because up until that point, like the whole goal was just get infantry, get my Ranger tab, go jump out of planes. The rest takes care of itself. So when I finally got my Ranger tab, it's like the dog who catches the car. I'm like, wait, so what does an actual platoon leader do? Like, I hadn't really worried or thought about this. And my expectations were like way different when I got there. And then the other thing, like once I got out of Ranger School, I never wanted to do anything hard or difficult again for the rest of my life. It's like, I want my office. I want my air conditioning. Like, I check that block. I'll go to the field. That's fine. But like, dude, Ranger School is suffering, pure and simple. And I even like, so I had like crazy ideas like, oh, one day I'll go out for CAG or one day I'll do SF or maybe like think about this, that, the other thing. Like, I walked out of Ranger School going, I will never do any of that ever again. My hard days are over. I've done enough. And it was probably a year before I even started like getting the itch of like, well, maybe I could try something else. Like, I mean, that was bad, but I'm still here. Like, maybe we start thinking about something else.
Humans have terrible long-term memories as far as the way it impacts our decisions, and that's why there's good and bad about that. I think there's inherently a reason for it, right? Is like you do a really hard, difficult thing, and you have this aversion to do anything like that. I felt the same way when I graduated Ranger School. It pinned that yellow and black tab on me that I never wore again. I was like, you know what? I wasn't even like happy about. It didn't even feel like an accomplishment. I was like, just get me out of here. I'm
Yeah.
tired of looking at Victory Pond. Get me out of here. I want to go home. I want to go to a steakhouse. I want to relax on the couch. I want to, be in a heated, box, which was my apartment at Independence Place in Columbus, Georgia. I was
Yep.
like, get me out of here. I didn't even feel proud about it. My parents showed up. It was a big deal. They put on a really nice ceremony, but that's not a
Oh,
ceremony. It was like I was like, guys, let's wrap this up, because they were making us do physical exercise up until they loaded us on the bus to Victory Pond, and and good memory now. I mean, I look back on it, I'm like, okay, I'm glad I did that. But IBOLC and Ranger School, there was a lot. I mean, pretty much the whole time there, there was a lot of times where I felt really sorry for myself. So
yeah. Yeah. No, you definitely learn to deal with some personal demons and personal shortcomings. Um, but it's also like the cool thing is like once you go through that, like other stuff in life will be harder, but nothing will ever suck more. So every time someone says like, "Oh, this is gonna be hard, this is gonna be anything," it's like, okay, whatever. Like, yeah, it's hard, but we can do it. So shut up and do it. Like that's we're already past that. Just get to work.
just get to
Quit
work. I
bitching.
like that.
Just it is what. Yeah, it's good. Suck. Guess what? Life is suffering. Just do it.
Yeah, there is a lot of times there's some truth in what you're saying, because a lot of times, some of the best things in life, some of the most valuable things that are part of my life experience were on the other end of suffering.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. There's no
yeah,
doubt about that in my mind. And it's so obvious to me. I don't mean to skip past half your Army career, but you had an inclination as an infantry officer, as you were moving up the ranks in the company grade level, talk platoon leader, XO, so on. You had an inclining to be a 18 Alpha, which for those that are not in the military, 18 Alpha is the MOS designation for a Special Forces officer, a Green Beret.
yes. So kind of a funny story there. I actually didn't want to be a Green Beret, but I was in my infantry unit and I'm looking around. I'm looking at all these majors and lieutenant colonels and everything else, and everyone seems miserable. And the only person who seems to be able to make a decision is a battalion commander. I'm like, okay, let me get this straight. I hang out for 16 to 18 years, assuming the cards fall in my direction and I do a good job. Uh, the big reward is I get to be a battalion commander, and everything else along the way is just dealing with miserable people who hate their jobs, and I can't find a single happy person in this organization. It's like, okay, I don't know if I'm doing 20 years in the Army, and I started off with a 7-year contract because I grad sewed. So I don't know if I'm staying in the Army for 20 years, but I know if I am staying in the Army for 20 years, it's not doing this. So I wanted to go to Ranger Regiment. So approached my battalion commander because to go to Ranger Regiment, you need to basically do whatever job you want to do in Ranger Regiment somewhere else in the Army first. So I finished
Yep.
up my first year as platoon leader. I got my Ranger tab. My back doesn't hurt yet. My knees are in good shape. I'm like, let's go. Let's go. I want to go to RASP. Let's do it. So I go to my battalion commander. I was like, hey, I really want to go to Ranger Regiment because you need your battalion commanders and your brigade commander's letter of recommendation just to apply.
I didn't know that.
Uh,
Okay, cool.
yeah. And he said, well, Ranger Regiment, the soldiers there are so good, they don't need good officers. That's a sham job for you. So why would you want to go there? You're staying here.
Wow.
Well, he said, I'll think about it, which was code for you're staying here. And
Yeah.
yeah, no one got a lot of recommendation to go to Ranger Regiment. And then I wanted to go to Best Ranger competition. The division was actually looking for volunteers. I'm like, shoot, I'll throw my hand. Like, I'd love to go to the Best Ranger competition. Like, let's get that's like on my bucket list. It's one thing that I never got to do. And that got denied. I was like, okay, this sucks. And then the deployment's coming up, and they weren't taking a lot of people, basically the battalion staff and a couple rifle platoons to pull tower guard. It's like, okay, they won't they won't even let me apply to go to Ranger Regiment, even though there's not a reason to keep me. They deny my packet to go to Best Ranger competition. Well, fun thing about Special Forces, it's the number one manning priority from the Army. It's like they can't keep me from putting in my packet for SF. So as soon as I found out, like, all right, can't go to Ranger Regiment, can't go to Best Ranger competition, you're not putting me on this next deployment. Okay. I walked into the Special Forces recruiter officer at Fort Drum, never thought about walking in there before, and said, I guess if I'm going to do 20 in the Army, this is my only option. So I may as well figure out what this is first.
That's so cool.
And
I didn't
yeah,
know that part of the story. And so, like, what Scott's describing is Ranger Regiment's an elite infantry unit in the
mhm,
Army. The discipline is just insane in Ranger Regiment. It's a joy to watch Ranger Regiment guys, conduct a live fire with
Oh
all the
yeah.
type classified weapons at their disposal. And so what Scott's describing, that unit, 75th Ranger Regiment, you need buy-in, and you really need recommendation from your chain of command and your leadership to go. And what Scott's describing with the Green Beret, the Special Forces route, is you don't. I mean, it's nice to tell them, hey guys, I'm applying to be a Green Beret, but
But
you
you
really
don't
don't
have
need their
to.
yeah, you really don't need their permission. You can just go direct to SOCOM and throw your hat in the ring and throw fill out the application. It's not a very lengthy application process. You have to take the D-Lab, which assesses your ability to learn a new language, learn a foreign language. I'm sure Scott did great on that test. They obviously want to test your physical fitness through SFAS, make sure that you can pass the muster and operate in austere mountainous environments, beach environments, swamp environment. Really, they want to make sure you're in good shape.
Yeah.
And then there's some other requirements too that you could probably get into, but that's so cool that that's how you ended up there. I didn't know that that was a path you took and kind of what led you there. Um, One thing I'm so enjoyed hearing about your time as an 18 Alpha, and I think it's so cool. You guys are few and far between. I was talking about this the other day that I think it's like less than 10% of the U.S. population are veterans, maybe even less now. It might be less than 5% now. A very, very small sliver of that are combat veterans who have actually been deployed in an active combat zone and seen combat. And then you sliver that down even more, and the personnel that are in SOCOM who wear that Green Beret are very, very few. I mean, it's unlikely that anybody listening to this outside of the military community, it's likely you don't even know anybody personally who has served in SOCOM as an operator, as an 18 Alpha. So tell me a little bit about that. I mean, what surprised you about once you were done with that lengthy training pipeline at Fort Bragg?
Mhm.
What surprised you about being Green Beret, either in a good way or a bad way? You can take it any way you want. What surprised you, or what did you enjoy about doing it? When you showed up to that first unit, what was it, third group?
Yep. Third group.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess two things, good and bad. So yeah, you go through the Special Forces qualification course. At the time it was a 2-year pipeline. They've been trying to do stuff to pare it down, but I went through the old long one. Showed up for third Special Forces group. We were already on the docket to deploy to Africa and then Afghanistan. Africa was to do JSETs, Joint Combined Exchange Training with different organizations, and then Afghanistan was to do, Afghanistan stuff. Um, First walked into my team room, and I actually lucked out. I showed up as a captain, and typically, you have to wait 6 months on staff for a team to open up and everything else. And I just finished military free fall school down in Yuma. So finished the Q course, got my military free fall badge. I still don't like jumping out of airplanes. I don't like heights. I don't care how high up it is. And get to third group and report to my battalion. And like, actually, we have a team open right now. That's their current guys leaving to go do something else, and you can just walk on and take a team. I was like, oh, okay. It's like I showed up for third group, and on day 2, I was a detachment commander, just like that.
That's
Uh,
so cool. I didn't know that.
what shocked me most, I walk in there, and there was still the old third group buildings, and those were basically built-in closets. Like you walk into the team room, and 10th Mountain Division, like every company had their own gym. Every platoon had their own office. I was the XO, then I was on battalion staff while I transitioned. Like it was cool, and I thought like SF unlimited money, they're gonna have like the most bougie things ever. They were under construction, but we didn't have them yet. So you walk into the team room, it's like a 20-foot by 20-foot box, and then they've built with 2x4s and plywood shelving around the room, and everything's stored underneath that. And then like your desk is on top of that, and there's daylight coming through the ceiling. Because there's a hole in the ceiling that still won't be fixed because the building's already been condemned, and the AC doesn't work, and it's North Carolina in the summer, so everyone's walking around with ranger panties and tank tops or not even, and it's like, all right, welcome to SF. There's your team room. Go do work.
That's not what I would expect. Yeah,
No,
that's
I was shocked when I walked in, and I was like, okay, well, this is a good gym somewhere, right? They're like, No, I'm just like, maybe I made a mistake. I don't know. But
So
no, it was
funny.
great. Um, the thing that really surprised me is that I'd completely change how I approached being a leader because, like regular army, it's very much learning your systems and processes, enforcing them. And the best way to describe is that in the regular army, you don't trust anyone any more than you absolutely have to. And even then, you try to find a way to trust them less. And that's the entire culture. In SF, it's you're trusted until you screw up and then you're just fired. So, and the
Makes
guys I had
sense.
working,
Yeah, it makes
yeah.
sense.
And the guys I had on the team, like best soldiers I'd ever seen. Like any one of them, if I'd taken them back with me to the regular army, would have been the best platoon sergeant in the battalion. Easy.
No doubt.
Like the
Yeah.
E5s, like just from a maturity standpoint. And I had a young team, probably the youngest team in the company. Um, and yeah, so I had to learn like, okay, so I don't need to babysit anybody. All these guys just do work and get stuff done. You're not necessarily like following all the like typical processes that I'm like familiar with, and that like to me being a success as an XO, company executive officer, battalion operations officer, like you enforce systems and processes. That's what success is. Here it doesn't matter. So that's out. No one needs me to babysit them or hold their hand. It's like, okay, so how exactly do I provide value to this team other than being a placeholder? And yeah,
Wow.
I'm
Yeah.
in great shape and all that, but I'm not athletic. So I was a physical stud in the regular army. Here, I'm just another guy. So yeah, I had to find a way to be valuable to that team. And every 12-man team in special forces is different. So you've been on one team, you've been on one team. So every captain who shows up goes through that differently based on what they walk into.
That's so cool. I love how descriptive you are. You're so good at describing stuff like this. And uh, I love hearing stories like this. And I think last time I saw you at Fort Bragg, I think I was going through captain's career course. I was still in the reserves. I've
Oh
since
yeah.
transitioned out of the reserves, but I think you and I went to like Speed Max. What's that place? Max
Yeah,
Speed Shop.
Max Speed Shop.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
staple in Fayetteville.
it's
So
it's like a make believe biker bar that actually has really good barbecue and a great beer selection. So,
there you go. That's a good way
yep.
to summarize it. But like I think so. One of the threads I wanted to pull on, which I think you said so eloquently, is the trust factor. And this is one thing that have read a lot about. How do you trust? How do you build trust within an organization? How do you trust an outside organization that you're either going to do business with or operate with or work with in some capacity? In my experience, and I don't know, maybe you can shed some light on this. You've got a better perspective than I do. My experience is that the smaller the organization, the higher the accountability. So the larger the organization, the lower the accountability. That's not always true, but I think across the board, when you get to a smaller organization, let's say you want to get a lawyer to represent you in some business dispute. The type of law firm I would gravitate towards would not be the 1,000 attorney law firm that's got an office in Miami and New York City and San Francisco and Denver and Dallas. I would like to work with that law firm that has two people or
Yep.
just one person, maybe just a sole proprietor, because the accountability is high. If there's a mistake made, you know exactly who's responsible. You can't hide behind, other people, other, bureaucratic entities or bosses or directors or leaders or VPs or other made up titles. Can you talk to me a little bit about accountability?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Large bureaucracies are designed to avoid accountability and to scale things, but every time you scale things, they become less efficient. I forget the name of the law, but there's some law out there that says the square root of the number of people in an organization do half the labor. So if you have an organization with 100 people in it, 10 of them do half the work. If they have 9 people in it, 3 of them do half the work. If they have 10,000 people in it, 100 of them do half the work.
Wow. No
S-
way.
Yeah. And
That sounds accurate to me, actually. I'm just like
yeah,
thinking through that. I'm like, that's not far from the truth.
when I first heard that, I was like, that's not. And then I thought about it. I'm like, I can't
There's
say
some
it's
truth in
wrong.
that.
I
That's
didn't
not
fact check
wrong.
it, but I can't say it's wrong.
Interesting.
Um,
So, what's the name of that law or rule or
I think it's
theory?
Price's Law, maybe
That sounds right. I've heard Price's Law. Yeah.
Price's Law or Pareto distribution.
So
I
the
don't
square
know.
root of the number of personnel,
Yep. In an
that number.
organization, do half the
Yeah.
work.
Cool. Yeah, that's been my experience. I haven't quantified it like that, but pretty much been my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So in those small teams, accountability is because God, everything leadership is so relationship based at that level. Like this sounds weird coming from someone from the army, but like you almost never give orders. Like you'll lay out the mission and sorry, this is our mission. Here's left and right limits. And you almost never give an order after that. You guide, you coach, you mentor.
Sure.
But to give a direct order sounds like a course correction. And it almost like, I don't trust you to solve this, so I'm giving you a direct order. So yeah, on those smaller teams, the accountability is so high that you don't need to do that. So you need to, if you are the person in charge of that small team, you need to exercise different leadership muscles to be relevant. Because it's also really easy to hang out and be irrelevant. Because yeah, like that team would have done amazing work whether or not I was there. So it's not like, oh, Captain Kelly makes them a great team. Like, no, they are a great team. I can make them a better team, but I got to figure out how. And that involves me adjusting to them more than it involves them adjusting to me. And in small teams, that happens very naturally. And it's easier for somebody who's working with you as a client on a small team to go back to the rest of the team, like, hey, I just had this conversation with Jack. You know, here's what he's going through, here's what he's thinking about. And everyone already has the context for it. So it's a very easy explanation of the problem, and everyone else starts generating ideas. Um, so the accountability is naturally built into it because everything's built off relationships. In large organizations, it's not built off relationships. Accountability is built off taskings. And once it's based
Hierarchies.
on tasking, yeah, hierarchies and tasking. So once it's based off that, it's a very different dynamic and it works, but you also have to engage that organization differently and lead that organization differently, whether you're on the outside or you're on the top down, or God help you if you're trying to work your way up.
It's a great perspective. That's really, really thoughtful. Yeah, that's been my experience too. And one thing, I don't want to go too far down an anthropology tangent, but I'm down to if you are. But I think human beings naturally kind of band together in groups of less than 100. And maybe, based on archaeological findings, sometimes less than 50. And like, so that's why there's some aversion, when people are interacting with strangers, because I don't think the human mind was brought up. I'm talking about millennia ago, to recognize a stranger as anything other than a threat or potential threat.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And from what I remember from anthropology from a decade ago, yeah, it's like there's different groupings and you can almost map them onto the military structure. So like a squad is the nuclear family, the platoon's your um, extended family, the company is your tribe, and then your battalion is the extended tribe because you can only really know like 500 people, 500 faces. That's kind of like what your human Rolodex can handle. So your battalion identity and everything else is paramount, which is why like that battalion commander, what that battalion commander does as a leader is very different than what the company commander, what the platoon leader, the squad leader does as a leader. And that's why there's a completely like different break between how the battalion commander operates with the company commander and then like the brigade commander operates with the battalion commander. Those are two wildly different relationships. And it's based off the limits of what human beings can form relationship wise. And I wish I could tell you where I got that from. And I someday got to go look it up, but it's made a lot of sense to me. And I certainly haven't found anything to contradict it.
Yeah, I think it's a hardware limitation. So let's talk about your cerebral cortex, your cerebrum. Your memory and the way that your synapses can form memories is limited, right? You can only know so many people, either by face, the way that I know you, I see your face, my optical nerve is transmitting the data from my retina to my brain, and I know you. I could pick you out of a crowd anywhere. I know you
Oh,
so well. I've spent so much time with you in Airborne School and through ROTC. I would recognize your voice or your face or even your eyeballs out of a crowd. And so the hardware limitation that Scott's describing is real true. And until we all get Neuralink and get some hard drive expansion through Neuralink. I know Elon Musk is working on that now. But right now, in this current state, it's definitely a firm hardware limitation for the majority of humans out there.
yeah,
So I think it's kind of cool. I don't know. It's kind of interesting, right?
it is.